This is Josh White with JW Math Tutoring. Today's video is going to go over the April 2023 school day SAT exam, specifically Section 4, the calculator part of the math portion. So let's go ahead and get started.
But life is a dream the calculus could never predict.
Just before we start going through the calculator section of the April 2023 school day QAS test, just a couple things to be aware of. So first of all, for a lot of these problems, I will show multiple methods to solve them. Thus, the time that it takes me to go through all 38 questions on this section of the test will most likely be more than the 55 allowed minutes. But that's just because I like to be thorough and I like to show people as many different ways as you can solve them. And obviously, besides that, if you like this video, you like my other math-related videos, please do click the thumbs up button to like them. And of course, subscribe to my channel, sign up for notifications as well. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Again, this is Section 4, Calculator section of the April 2023 QAS. So when you're looking at this very first question here, number 1, you're given a graph. You have 2 lines on the graph. And it basically says, or it asks you, in what year did both the states have the same population? So we're just looking for the intersection point. That's all it's really asking for. So they intersect right here. And of course, what year is that? Well, it is 1940. So the correct answer for this one is just letter B, and that's it. Below it, we have another question that deals with a graph. And on this question, it's just asking what the predicted value would be when the age is 5 months. So you just go to where x is equal to 5, right here. You go up to the line and basically get the y value, which is essentially going to be somewhere between 19 and 20. If you went over, it's like right around here or so. So correct answer is going to be B, 19.4. That's the only number that's between 19 and 20. All right, in number 3, you have just kind of a general probability question here. And so you have just a regular, they call it a fair number cube. It's basically just like a basic die, with 1 through 6. On the sides of it or the faces. So you roll it one time. What's the probability that 2 shows up? Well, there's 6 total outcomes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that goes in the denominator of our probability fraction. The numerator is the number of favorable outcomes, so that would just be 1. Okay, because 2 can only happen one way, which is when the 2 shows on the top face. So correct answer is just letter A, 1 over 6. Question number 4 here at the bottom. They're talking about the fuel efficiency of a car, which is 30 miles per gallon. So if you wrote this with the units in the appropriate places, miles goes on top, per means division, gallon goes on the bottom. And it uses 5 gallons of gasoline, so they want to know how many miles did it travel. So, okay, 30 miles for 1 gallon, but we used a total of 5 gallons. So you would just multiply those two together, and that's just going to equal 150 total miles. Correct answer is letter D. Moving on to the next page. At the top, question number 5. So here you are given the slope of the line, which is 7. All right. You're also given the point 0, 5. Talk about that in a second. Right off the bat, A and B are gone because they do not have the correct slope. Everything here is in slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b, but they do not have a 7 in front of the x. So we're down to C or D. All right, now notice 0, 5 is the y-intercept of this line because it has an x-coordinate of 0. Therefore, b is equal to 5, and specifically positive 5. Therefore, correct answer here is going to be letter D, y equals 7x plus 5. Now, if for some reason you didn't recognize that, you could just technically go and plug in, 5 for the y value, 7 for m, 0 for the x value into y equals mx plus b, and then you could solve for b. But hopefully you notice 7 times 0 is 0. Okay, 5 equals 0 plus b, and b is just going to equal 5, which, like I said, we already knew. But correct answer is going to be letter D. All right, next up, for number 6 here, this one is easiest just to do by basically back solving, like taking the answer choices, looking at the inequalities, and then plugging them in. So, for example, we need here the x value to be greater than 7. Okay, in A, is 0 greater than 7? No, eliminate it. B, is 3 greater than 7? No. Is C greater than 7? No. Excuse me, 6 in C, is that greater than 7? No. D, well, it's the only one left by process of elimination, so it has to be the correct answer. Now, we can also check that the y value, which is 8, is less than the x value, which is 9. So it meets, both of the conditions. But really, when we look at this second one first, we can eliminate 3 of the other answer choices as being incorrect. You could try graphing this out, like, and sketching this out, and then seeing which of these points are the thing. But it's just way too much time, way too much work to do that when you can just easily figure out the answer by, plugging in the answer choices. All right, question number 7. Here we have another graph with a scatter plot where you have your predicted values on the line of best fit, and you have your actual values. And so they want to know, okay, when x is 20, how much greater is the actual than the predicted? So here, where x is 20, the actual is, is the point value. So it looks like it's halfway between 300 and 350. So I'm going to guess like 325 for the actual value. The predicted is what the y value would be on the line of best fit. So that looks like it is right at 250. Okay, so our predicted value is 250. So how much greater is it? Well, it's just 325 minus 250. That's going to be 75. You can do this on the calculator, obviously, if you can't do it in your head. Correct answer is going to be letter C. Moving now back to the top of the page, problem number 8. This one is basically dealing with an exponential function. And the way you know that is because it's talking about something increasing by a percentage. Whenever you see a problem which talks about something increasing or decreasing, either by a percentage or like some other thing like twice or half, okay? In other words, it's not adding a set value or subtracting a set value. That's going to be an exponential function, right? And the basic kind of form, I mean, there's different letters you can see in different books, but it's like A is like your initial value out front, and then B is like the increase or decrease thing, which is usually like 1 plus R, 1 minus R, where R is like your rate of growth, your rate of decay. Okay, so 142 is the starting amount from 2001. All right, because here they're saying X is the number of years since 2001. So 1.42 is what's going to be in the very front right here. And then for the thing that's actually being raised, to the X, to the variable, the exponent, that is the 12, that's where the 12% increase comes in. So that's basically going to be, 1 plus 12% as a decimal, which is 0.12, and you would just simplify that to 1.12. So final equation should be 1.42 and then times 1.12 to the x. Correct answer is going to be letter D. Now below that we have question number 9. Here we have a system of linear equations. I will first just show how I would do this by hand, just for good practice, and then after that I'll show how we could get the answer on the calculator. But one thing just to keep in mind, so here they are asking for 7x plus 4y. If you notice in a lot of these problems, when they ask you for some what seems to be a random expression, meaning not what the solution is, but like, here, 7x plus 4y, you can generally easily get that by just taking the two equations and maybe adding them or subtracting them without doing much work. So if you notice here, if you add these two equations together, 5x plus 2x is 7x. 3y plus y is 4y. 7 plus 2 is 9. So what does 7x plus 4y equals? It equals 9. Correct answer is C. Now, an alternate way that you could do that is you could solve this for x and y and then just plug the values in to one of the two equations. Now, I would do all of this on the graphing calculator. So the first thing I have to do is get, and I'm going to do this using matrix properties. If you're not sure how to do this, check out my other videos on calculator operations or calculator hacks, because it will show you exactly how to solve a system of linear equations by using matrix properties. So first I need a 2 by 2 matrix, and I'm going to enter in the coefficients for the x and the y terms. So I've got 5 and 2 for my x's, 3 and 1 for the y's. Then what you do is you raise this to the negative first power. Don't worry about why you do this, just memorize what to do. Then I need a 2 by 1 matrix, and here I'm going to enter in the coefficients for the numbers on the right. So it's going to be positive 7 over positive 2. Okay, so I get my answer. So now the top number listed there is for the first variable, which in this case is x. The bottom one's for the y. So I need 7 times negative 1 plus 4 times 4. Positive 9, same answer. That's an alternate method you could use if you don't recognize that you can just add these two together and get the answer. And it really doesn't take that long to do on the calculator if you're familiar with how to solve a system of linear equations using matrix properties. All right, for number 10, here, this is basically just kind of like a real simple, essentially it's like a ratio type problem, equation, really, word problem, sort of. So they tell you the ratio of electoral votes, that x received to y was 3 to 1. So that means you could say like 3x, which is the number that candidate x received, plus 1x, which is the 1 for the candidate y. And you could add those up, and those would equal 4. Now, if you notice, when you go to solve this, it's just going to be really simple or really basic. X is going to equal 1, which means that, 3 times 1 is just 3, and 1 is just 1. So candidate X got 3, candidate Y got 1. They want to know how many candidate Y received, so the correct answer is just A, 1. Okay, and that's it. No more work to that one. Let's move on to the next page. Question number 11 here at the top. Here we have another graph. This looks like an exponential, not a linear graph, since there is somewhat of a curve. So when we look at this graph, notice that the y values are increasing as the x values are also increasing. That means this is going to be exponential growth. Therefore, we can technically get rid of A and B because these are both exponential decay. These are both going to look like this, going down to the right, not up. So those can be crossed out, and now you're left with C and D. So the easiest way that I would do this one is I would notice that when x is 0, the y-intercept is like something between 3 and 4. So when you plug in 0 for x, to both of these, notice that the number in the parentheses raised to 0 would just be 1. And so for C, you would get 1.02 times 1, 1.02. For D, you would get 3.26 times 1, which is 3.26. Therefore, it has to be D. Basically, the strategy that I'm using there is what I call point matching, where I'm finding a specific point on the graph, and then I'm plugging that in to the equations to see which one matches it. You could use these other points as well. I just think 0 is easiest because the 0 exponent just makes the whole thing 1, and then really you're just looking at the number, out front. 3.26 is the initial value. All right, below that, question 12, we have another graph here. This one has a bunch of, whatever, up and down lines on it. And so this one wants to know, which time period between these 2 years had the greatest increase in number of asteroids. So really what you're looking for here, since these are all 1-year periods, meaning if you think about slope like rise over run, the run for these is all the same. It's all one. It's 1 year. So you're technically looking for like which of these segments has the steepest rise. So you're basically looking at like '03 to '04, which would be, from here to here. You're looking at '04 to '05. Just turn to a different color. Okay, which would be from here to here. It looks like that is flatter than um, '03 to '04. So that one is probably not going to be the correct answer. And then we have '05 to '06. Okay, it looks like this is possibly the same with '03 and '04, but also steeper than the middle one. So like for right now, this one's out for sure. Okay, get rid of that. And now for the last one, '07 to '08. So now we have this section right here, and you can see this is much steeper than any of the other three previous sections. So the correct answer is going to be D, but if you wanted to like actually numerically confirm it, you could just measure the change between the Y values. So like, for '03 to '04, it goes from like 58 to, just erase this so I can see the exact values. Maybe like 58 to 72, so it's like a change of 14, And then this one we said it's already not steeper, so whatever, ignore that. This goes from like maybe 82 to 100, so that's a change of 18, But this one goes from like maybe 48 to 85, So that's obviously a much larger increase. That would be like, what, 37? So therefore, it's going to have the steepest slope. All right, now back at the top of the page, problem number 13. Here you have two equations, and which of these will have infinite solutions, or it's also called all real numbers? So on the left, if you go ahead and just distribute, you will get 4x plus 4, for both of them. And then you got a plus 2, plus 1 on the bottom. Okay. Plus 6, 4x plus 7. So notice what happens on top. The 4 and the 2 here just create a 6 when you combine them together. On the bottom, you get a 5, 4 plus 1. Now, infinite solutions happens when you have the exact same expression on both sides of an equation. So that's going to be true for this one right here. Because if you went to try to subtract like 4x on both sides to cancel it out, to move it over, you would get 6 equals 6, which is always true regardless of what value x is. However, the bottom one technically will be no solution because the variables would all cancel out and you would get two numbers that are not equal to each other. 5 never is equal to 7. So the correct answer to this one is going to be letter A, 1 only. Next up, number 14. This is basically like a statistics survey kind of sampling type problem. So first, I'll tell you that the correct answer is C. And the reason you cannot go basically any further than the finance department is because they basically like say you started with a company and then you drilled down to one department in a company, and then inside that department you only took a sample of the employees there. You didn't take all the you didn't even take all the employees in the finance department. You took a sample of them, meaning there are other employees that were not selected for the survey. So you can only generalize this to the group of which that sample is, basically a part of or taken from. So the 50 employees were taken from the finance department. Therefore, you can only generalize it to the overall finance department, in total. You cannot go to the company in total because it was only from one specific department, and you can't go, further than that because this is only one specific company that was surveyed. That's why A is out. But it is C. You can go to, the finance department, not just all the employees, because we're assuming that they used appropriate, like statistical techniques when they designed and administered the survey. All right, for the last one on this page, problem number 15. uh, multiple ways to do this. So the easiest way is to recognize if you take this equation and you just multiply both sides by 6, on the left you would get 6r, on the right you would get 60 over 3s, but 60 over 3 is just 20, so the correct answer is going to be A, 20s. Now, if you didn't see that and recognize that, that's fine. This is a perfect opportunity to use picking numbers. So what I would do is I would first pick a number for s. So I am going to let s, what did I choose? Equal to 3. The reason I did that is to basically get rid of the fraction, make it easier to work with. So if s is equal to 3, then I have 10 over 3 times 3. 3's cancel. That means r is equal to 10. Okay? So s is 3, r is 10. Now, what is 6r equal to? Well, just 6 times 10, 10 times 6, so that's 60. So now you go through these expressions and you say, okay, which one is equal to 60? Well, based on s being 3. 20 times 3 is 60. Okay, that checks. 60 times 3 is 180. No. 5 over 9 times 3. I mean, that's going to be some fraction. It's going to be like 5/3. No. 16 over 3 times 3. Well, the 3's cancel, but you get 16. No. So that just confirms correct answer is letter A. And he said you could use picking numbers to solve that as well. Continuing on to the next page, problem number 16 at the top here, you have a basically set of data. It has a total of 11 values in it originally, and then they take one away, specifically the 12 or the lowest value, and then they ask you to compare the mean and median for the original set to the new set without the 12. So first thing I would do is I would compare the medians of both of them, and then after that, we can worry about the means. So since there's 11 items here, basically we can just, essentially cross out, or another way to think of it is you take 11, you divide it by 2. That comes out to 5.5. You then round that up to 6. That means the sixth item in this set of 11 will be the median. So you could just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now you could also do the method where you start on the left and right, you cross out one each going each direction, you'll still end up at 19 being the median. Okay, so the way I would do this, I'm just going to have P and N, and I'm going to have mean, and then median. Okay, so P is the original, therefore it is going to have a median of 19. Now, if you take away the 12, so just like completely eliminate that, pretend it isn't there. Now when we have 10 items, it's technically going to be the average of the fifth and sixth items, which will be the median. So, if we count, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4. This is the fifth, this is the sixth, and over here you have 1, 2, 3, 4. So the average of 19 and 19 is still going to be 19. So the median for n is going to be 19 as well. So notice the median is r for the first one and t for the second one. So now we know that r is equal to t. So right off the bat, A is out, B is out. Okay? Now, for the mean, first I'll show you the reason way through it, and then I'll give you the actual values for it. So if you look at the original set, we have, again, 11 numbers here, and you could add them up and then divide by 11. But the way you can reason this theoretically without actually calculating the mean, figuring out the answer is, okay, the original mean is going to be some value, okay, and it's also represented by the letter Q. Now, if you take away the 12, notice that 12 is the lowest value in the set. Therefore, the mean will have to increase or go up, okay? Because the mean of the original 11 numbers is obviously greater than 12. Again, I'll give you the exact value in a second here. It looks like it's going to be somewhere, close to 19. But the point is, once you take away a number which is below the mean or the average of a data set, the average of the remaining numbers will then increase. It's like, if you think about it, you took 5 tests in a class, okay? And if they drop your lowest score, and then you only have 4 tests counting towards your grade, well, the average is obviously going to increase or go up. So therefore, the mean for S, which is the new data set, will be greater than the mean for P, the original data set, which is the letter Q. Therefore, correct answer for this one is going to be letter C. Now, if you wanted to go ahead and add up all the values and then divide by 11 and then take 8 to 12, divide by 10, I'll just show you. For P, it comes out to 211 divided by 11, which is 19.2. Just write that over here, 19.2. Whereas for n, you take away this 12. Technically, the top is now going to be 199 divided by 10, and that's going to be 19.9. So this will also numerically confirm that the mean for dataset n is greater than the mean for dataset p, or in other words, S is greater than Q, or Q is less than S. Again, correct answer is letter C. Okay, for this one, for 17, there are multiple ways you could do this. So the quickest way is to notice that if you multiply by 3 halves on both sides to basically cancel out the fraction here, on the right side you get x minus 7, because 3 cancels, 2 cancels. Okay, on the left side, 2 goes into 6 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. So we get 9 equals x minus 7. Notice, oh, that matches answer choice C. Therefore, that's going to be the correct answer. Basically, C is just a different version of this equation, but it really has the same solution. It just looks different because we multiplied both sides by something. Now, an alternate way to do this would be if you didn't, somehow if you didn't recognize this and you just went ahead and solved it, you could say, okay, I know that x equals 16 in the first equation as my answer. And then you could go through all of these and see, okay, when I solve these out, which of them gives me x equals 16? Well, it's obviously going to be C because we just add 7 and you get 16. The others are 23, whatever 16 times 3 halves is for B, and then for D it's going to be 9 plus 14 thirds, whatever that works out to. So correct answer is, again, letter C. Back to the top of the page for number 18. So this is basically just a linear equation or a line where you have some sets of points and they want to know what the relationship is. In other words, this is no different than any of the problems where they give you a couple points and they want to know what the equation of the line is. So there are multiple ways you could do this. You could set up the slope equation, m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And here, the y2, the y values, y2 and y1 would be t technically, and the x2 minus x1 would be d. However, I think the easiest way to do this is back solving. And so what I would do is I would take this first point here. I would take 0.16, and I'm just going to plug it in for D in all of the available equations or answer choices. So if you do that, and you multiply it through, we're looking for 4 as the answer we get. Let me fix this first one again. It should be 0.16, not 1.6. So the only one that works out correctly too is going to be B right here. And that's the correct answer to the problem. You do the rest of these, 1/25 times 0.6 is some ridiculously small number, and then 1/40 times 0.16, again, an even smaller number. 40 times 0.16 is going to work out to be 6.4, which is not correct. So for this one, again, the way that I would solve this, I would attack this, is just using back solving. Take one of these points and plug it in. But alternate methods could be to find the slope by plugging in, 2 of these values here and then dividing them. So 12 minus 4 over 0.48 minus 0.16. And you read 8 divided by 0.32. And then that you just do it on the calculator. And when you do it, it's going to come out to be 25. At least it should be. And that would be the slope of your equation. And if you notice here, there's only one possible answer choice that has a slope of 25. Now, moving on to 19 and 20, this one, we're going to have to kind of jump back and forth because the graph is on a different page than the 2 questions are. But here is the graph. Here is a line of best fit. Again, it's like the 3rd or 4th problem with this. And here are some actual values, the actual dots on the thing. Okay. All right, so this question is asking for the best approximation for the ratio of rhinos in 1984 to 2012. So all we have to do here is basically go to the graph. We're going to get the actual values. We're going to use the actual points, not the values from the predicted lines, but the actual values. So 1984 would obviously be right here because that would be 0 years since 1984. So it looks like that's about 4,000. Now, for 2012, that is going to be 28 years after 1984. You could subtract that on the calculator if you're not sure. So 28 is going to be a little more than halfway between 25 and 30. So it looks like it's probably going to be this point right here. This one, it's a little over 20,000, but I'm just going to estimate it at 20,000 just, you know, so I have numbers that are easy to work with. So you could just go to the calculator. You could do 4,000 divided by 20,000. Or I just noticed the 3 zeros all cross out, which is just 4 over 20, which is 1 over 5. So do we see an answer here that is 1 to 5? Yes. So letter B, correct answer for this problem. Now in 20, it's asking about the slope of this line of best fit. If I jump back just for the problem, first of all, notice it's positive because it's going uphill. So right off the bat, we can get rid of this, we could get rid of this, and now it's a question between C or D. Now there's technically two ways you could do this. One way I would do is I would just pick some easy values to work with. So what I mean by that is I'm going to start here at 0, and I'm going to go to 10. And here at 0, it looks like it's like halfway between 0 and 5,000, or maybe it's like a little bit less than it. So I'm going to use, maybe like 2,000 as my starting value here. And then when I go to 10, this looks like it's a little more than halfway between 5,000 and 10,000. You know, halfway between would be 7,500. So I'm going to use 8,000, and my x value, of course, is 10. So when I subtract those points, okay, on the top I get negative 6,000. On the bottom I get negative 10. The two negatives will just cancel, so whatever, I'll make them positive. So 6,000 divided by 10, that's just 600. So now we go back here. Do we see anything close to that? Yes. Okay. C, 650, much closer to 600 than 2,500 is. So correct answer for this is going to be letter C. Now, an alternate way you could do this is you could technically like just take two of the values on this line, any two values, and you could go to the calculator and you could use the lin-reg function and you could plug them in, and then it'll give you the slope and technically the y-intercept, which we kind of already have here as well. So the calculator can do this for you. You just have to pick 2 points. So like you could pick the same points and just go to the calculator instead of doing the work by hand, or you could pick 2 different points. You know, it doesn't really matter, but that's an alternate way you could figure it out. All right, now moving to the top on the other side of the page, problem number 21. So this one, you could go ahead and you could start to solve this by squaring both sides. And then you get the squared and the square root canceling out. So you get x squared equals 25. And then to actually solve for x, you would now square root it again. And so you get x equals plus or minus square root 25, which is just plus or minus 5. So the correct answer for this one's going to be letter B. However, note that you could also do this by back solving, meaning you take the answer choices and plug them in. And so like take an answer, take a number like 5, plug it in, square it, 25, square root it. Does it equal positive 5, the number you expect to get on the right side? Well, the answer is yes. So at that point, like you would eliminate A and you would eliminate C. Or if you tried like positive 25 and you noticed it didn't work, I mean, I guess you only eliminate A. Whereas if you tried negative 25, you could eliminate A and C. But the point is, you could also do this one by back solving. Just take the answer choices, plug it into the equation. Just make sure you enter the things in correctly with parentheses and so on. All right, now for 22, this one there are multiple ways you could do this. If you have the unit circle memorized and if you've taken trigonometry, pre-calculus, you most likely have covered the unit circle. I mean, basically, the cosine, okay, of AOB, which is this angle right here, the cosine, of an angle, the unit circle is its x-coordinate. So basically, um, they're asking here for which angle, again in radians, will be negative 1/2 comma, something. And it's going to, I mean, it turns out it's √3/2, but that doesn't matter for this problem. So if you have the unit circle memorized, then you could just get the value from that, and it's going to be letter C, 2π/3. However, if you do not have the unit circle memorized, but you still know basic trigonometry, sine, cosine, and tangent, and also special right triangles, here's how you could still figure this problem out regardless. So let me just erase this for a second. So now they tell us that the cosine of AOB here, this large angle is negative 1/2. So what you can technically do, okay, is you can draw a right triangle here. And since cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, we can label this side -1, which would make sense because we're technically going, in the negative x direction. And then 2 would be the hypotenuse right here. Now, this y value, we don't know. If you recognize this is technically going to be a 30, 60, 90 triangle, what's going to happen is the 30 is going to be at the top, the 60 is going to be down here. However, if you did not recognize that, you could still figure it out just by using basic trig. You know what I'm saying? So technically on the calculator, you'd have to do it with a positive, most likely with a positive value. So you could do like, first of all, you could do Pythagorean theorem. I'll use y since I labeled it y originally. And you have whatever, -1 squared plus y squared equals 2 squared. I know that typically for triangles we normally just make the sides positive and talk about distances being positive. So whatever, I'll just change this to positive. But I'm labeling it -1 just because it's technically in the second quadrant. So you could go ahead and you could solve this, and you could see that y squared here equals 3, or in other words, y equals square root of 3. So this side up here is going to be square root of 3. And now also, if you wanted to solve for this angle, what we could do is, like I said, you could just set up a ratio with any basic trig function you wanted now. You could do arcsine, arccosine, or basically inverse, or arctangent, doesn't matter. Let's just use the original cosine one. So I'm going to do the cosine of this angle theta is equal to 1/2. And now, again, I'm using it just positive because of the calculator. So cosine inverse of 1/2. You go ahead, you do that on the calculator, okay? And I'm just going to put it into, let's see here, radians, because we want everything to be in radians. I'm just going to do 0.5 instead of 1/2. Okay, so notice it gives me this many radians, but I don't know what that is because normally we're used to seeing it in terms of pi. So all you have to do in that case is just take this answer and divide it by pi. And that will tell you how many radians it is. So it's going to be 1/3 pi radians, and you could just convert this to a fraction. Okay, it's 1/3, yep. So that means theta is equal to pi over 3 radians. All right, so now what we could do is to find basically AOB, we would just, there's multiple ways you could look at this. Essentially, we want this whole angle right here, okay? And we know that this little part right here is pi over 3, Okay, the red part is the pi over 3 radians part. So you could say, all right, this whole thing is 180 or is 180 degrees or is pi radians. So if I subtract off the red part, subtract off pi over 3, that's going to give me 2 pi over 3. You know, just get a common denominator, 3 pi over 3 minus pi over 3, 2 pi over 3. So you could get the answer that way. Or you could also look at it as like this is pi over 2, and then you could do like pi over 2 minus pi over 3 to get this little like remainder in here, and then you could add pi over 2 to that. But that's a lot more complicated, and it gets into like stuff over 6 and everything. So I would probably just do it the first way, which is this whole angle from here to here is pi. Subtract off this angle right here that we found, which is pi over 3. What you're left with is AOB, which is 2 pi over 3. Again, the way that you could do this right off the bat without any of this work is if you have the unit circle memorized. All right, moving on now to questions 23 and 24. The next page, here we have a chart which has a bunch of values in it, and there are two questions that reference it. The first one at the bottom here is number 23, and you're just finding, basically taking the volume of this mouse, whatever this substance is, oxide. So it's just 1047.4. And you're putting that over human oxide, 24,429. You're just dividing that. It comes out to 0.042875, and then you just convert it to a percentage. So we multiply by 100, move the decimal over two places. So 4.29% is our answer, letter A. That's it, no more work needed. For 24, here they give you basically the volume, which comes from the table. Now we're looking at hamster oxide, and they want to know if this is a sphere, what would the radius be? So you're basically taking the formula for volume of a sphere, 4/3 pi r cubed, setting it equal to 6708.8, and then solving this for r. However, first I'll show you how to do that. So what I would do, and you could do this, there's multiple ways you could do this. You could do this on the calculator on one step, but I'm just going to multiply by 3/4. And then, let's see, the number I get is 5,031.6 approximately. Then I would divide by pi. That lets me with r cubed equal to, should be 1601.6, and then we just cube root both sides. R is going to be approximately 11.69999. So it's very, very close to 11.7. The correct answer is D. But also notice, once you get it set up in this equation right here, you could just back solve this. Just go on the calculator, type 4/3 times pi times, start with answer A, to the third power, hit enter. Is it 6708? No. Move on to B. No. Move on to C, and eventually you'd have to go through it a bunch of times, but you would find D is the correct answer. So you could also do back solving on that problem. All right, in 25, here you have a formula for basically a pendulum and about, time to complete one cycle and all this stuff. And they give you basically a version of the formula, but they've plugged in a number for L. They've plugged in 12 for L. And then they ask you a question, basically like which question, accurately describes this new version of the equation. So obviously t is the time, so it's going to be the time in seconds. But if you look at all these different answer choices, they're all dealing with length, like the length of the pendulum cycle. And notice that the length was just replaced or substituted with 12. So the correct answer for this one is going to be letter C. Okay? Because this equation now, if you work it out, it'll give you some value, and that value is the time it takes the pendulum to complete one full cycle for a length of 12 meters, because L has been replaced with 12. Don't worry about any of the numbers and what they mean, like 9.8 deals with gravity. acceleration due to gravity and all that stuff, and 2 pi or whatever. Don't worry about any of those. The correct answer for this one is C because L has been replaced with 12. All right, below that we have an equation, and it asks us how many distinct real solutions does it have? So the answer for this is going to be 0. Now, the traditional way to solve this would be to subtract the 1 to the other side, and then you can go ahead and do the square root property, square root both sides, because the left side's now already factored. And you get x minus 5 equals the square root of negative 1, of course, plus or minus. But the square root of negative 1 is just defined to be I. So at this point, you should hopefully notice that this does not have any real solutions. It will have two complex solutions, 5 plus I, 5 minus I, but it will not it will have 0 real solutions. An alternate way that you could do this is you could go ahead and you could graph out this equation. So in other words, graph out y equals x minus 5 squared plus 1. And then what you'll see is there are no values on the graph where it crosses 0. In other words, there are no x-intercepts, which means there are no real solutions. So just to show you real quick here, if we graph this out, quadratic function or parabola, it's going to open up. It's going to have a vertex at 5, comma 1 because it's technically in vertex form. Okay, notice there it does not cross the x-axis at all. Therefore, it does not have any real solutions, roots, zeros, x-intercepts, whatever terminology you want to use. They all mean the same thing. So therefore, that is another way to confirm that the answer is 0. All right, in 27, in this problem, you're just taking a number in scientific notation, you're multiplying it by 0.04%. And then the thing that's a little weird here is they want to keep it in scientific notation, but with the same exponent. So they don't want you to actually write it in proper scientific notation, which would mean like, the number in the front has only one value to the left of the decimal place. So it's like, it kind of looks like this. You have 1.989 times 10 to the 30th. You multiply the 1.989 times 0.04%. But remember, to convert a percent to a decimal, you have to move it decimal place 2 places to the left. So the actual number you're multiplying by is 0.0004. Okay? Not 0.04, but the decimal equivalent of 0.04%. When you do that, on the calculator, what you're going to get is 0.0007956, and then you just add on the scientific notation part, because we haven't done anything with, changing that or moving that. We've only multiplied, these two values overall. So correct answer is going to be letter A. Now for 28 at the bottom, here we have another example where we have a table of values. It's for a linear function, i.e. or a line. And they want to know what the value of f of 6 is. So as I've covered previously with a bunch of these problems, there are multiple ways you could do this. Straightforward way would be to find the slope by doing y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. If you do that, it's just going to be like 16 over minus 4 over 12 minus 4. That gives us, let's see, 10 over 8, which will reduce to 5 over 4. So the slope of this line, oh, excuse me, no, it's not. I misread my own handwriting. Sorry, this should be a 4, not a 6. It's 16 minus 4, not 16 minus 6. It's 12 over 8, not 10 over 8. It should reduce to 3 halves. Okay. So now you could go to y equals mx plus b, and we could pick one of these points. And let's see, I chose the point 4, 3 halves times 4 plus b. You could solve this out. 3 times 4 is 12. 12 divided by 2 is 6. So the y-intercept is negative 2. Therefore, the equation of the line is y equals 3 halves x minus 2. And now you could just plug 6 in. So 3 times 6, 18. 18 divided by 2 is 9. 9 minus 2 will equal 7. Therefore, it looks like the correct answer is going to be letter A. However, there are multiple ways you could do this on the calculator, basically to avoid having to do it by hand. So I'll show you, just review lin-reg function. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to pick two of these points. I'm going to enter 4 and 12. And now here are my y values, 4 and 16. All right, now that's done. I'll go back to the stat menu. I'll go to calc, and I'll go to option 4. X's are L1s, Y's are L2. Okay, let's go ahead and calculate it. Okay, so notice it gives me y equals 1.5 for the slope, which that's the same as 3 halves. And for the b, it gives me -2. Now at this point, you could just punch in the calculator, y equals 1.5 times 6 minus 2, and get the answer that way. Or you could technically graph it out and then get it, look at the table of values off the graph and get it from that as well. All right, at the top of the next page, we have problem number 29. So for this problem, you just have the equation of a line, but it's a generic equation with no numerical value for the slope and the y-intercept, and they want to know which of these tables here lists the corresponding points on the line. So first I'll show you the theoretical way you can figure out the actual values, but then I'll also show you just with picking numbers how you could do it. So uh, what I did first is I said let x equal 1, okay? So if you plug in 1 for x, you have y equals m times 1 plus b. Or in other words, the y coordinate that corresponds to that is just m plus b. So when we go down through the answers, we can see that for a, the y coordinate, which is just m, is wrong. So eliminate this. B is correct, so we keep it so far. C is correct, it has m plus b. Keep it so far, and D does not, so therefore D is wrong. So now for comparing B and C, you just have to pick one of the 2 points, one of the 2 x values, and plug them in. So I guess I went with, let's see, let's look at C. I'm going to plug in B for x. Look at the third point listed there. So if you do that, it's just y equals m times b plus b, or mb plus b. All right, so that's not going to equal 0 unless b also happens to equal 0. So this is going to be incorrect or not the correct answer. So we can eliminate this one. And the correct answer is going to be, in fact, letter B. Now, an easier way to do this might just be to pick numbers. And so pick a number for M, pick a number for B. So I just chose 1 for each. In other words, I just said, let's say we have the linear equation y equals x plus 1. All right, and then we go through the answer choices, and I'm just going to plug in. So, and let me just put up here, M was 1, B was 1. Okay. So, if you start going through A, start in the middle again, take 1, plug it in for x. Okay, 1 plus 1 is 2. So does that match what the y-coordinate says here in the table? Well, no, the y-coordinate in the table is m, which is 1. 1 does not match 1 plus 1, which is 2. So A is wrong. Move on to B. Take 1, plug it in. 1 plus 1 is 2. Is m plus b equal to 2? Yes. Keep it. Same thing with C. And of course, D is going to be wrong because it has the same thing as A does. It has M, but it has 1. It would be 1 here for our numbers we chose, but it's really supposed to be 2. Okay. So now, again, you could choose between B and C. And so, let's see here. I might plug in, so let's go with C. Let's look at answer choice C first. Let's take B, which is 1, and plug it in. So it's just y equals 1 plus 1, y equals 2. So when I plug in the value for B, which I've chosen to be 1, do I get 0 as my y coordinate or my output? No, I do not. Therefore, correct answer will be letter B. And you could plug in the other 2 points to confirm. I mean, -2, they're the same, so that's why, should have mentioned this earlier, that's why we have to compare the third point here. In other words, for -2, the y coordinates are the same for B and C. So plugging in -2 doesn't get us anywhere. It doesn't differentiate them. It's only the third point listed there that you have to use to compare them. Okay, for number 30, this is a tricky one because this is a linear equation, but the way it's set up is a little bit different than what we're used to. So basically, you have $45 per month fee, and then there's also this discount coming into play as well. So if you think about this, really what happens is you have a basically $45 per month that you pay, but the first month is going to be $20 less than that. So there's multiple ways you could look at this. One way to think about this is okay, so it's like 45, plus 45, plus 45, plus 45, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And this is for T months, in total. Okay. The number of months here is whatever, T. So the first one has a discount of $20. So you take that off. Therefore, the first month is $25. Then all the remaining months are $45. How many remaining months are there? Well, it's now T minus 1 because I excluded the first month, which has the discount. So the number of months left, which are $45, is T minus 1. So therefore, if I wanted to set up the equation, it's going to be $25 month 1 plus $45 times the number of months remaining, which is T minus 1. So the correct answer for this one is going to be actually letter D. Now, you could also use the strategy here of picking numbers. And so what I did is I said, okay, let T equal 3. So if you paid for 3 months of a membership, how much would it cost? Well, the first one is going to be 45 minus the 20, which is 25. And then the other two are going to be 45 and 45. All right? So together, you just go to the calculator. It's going to be 90 plus 25. It's going to be 115. So now, as we go through the various answer choices, you just plug in what T is, which is 3, to each of these expressions. For A, it's going to be 45 times 3, which is 135. And then plus 20, that's going to be 155. That is obviously not 115. Cross it out. For B, it's going to be basically just $5 more because notice it's like the 45 times T part is the same, but now it's adding 25 instead of 20. So instead of 155, it'll be 160. That's not right. Cross it out. For C, if you go ahead and plug it in, so 3 for T minus 1 is 2. 2 times 45 is 90. 90 plus 20 is 110. Okay, that is not correct. We're looking for 115. And then D is going to be correct, but we could just confirm it. 3 minus 1 is 2. 2 times 45 is 90. 90 plus 25, 115. Correct answer. So you could also use picking numbers for this if you're not sure exactly how to get the equation algebraically. All right, now moving on to the student-produced responses, or the grid-ins. So for problem number 31, we have 10 numbers listed here. They want to know the mean. So this is literally just add up all these numbers, divide by 10. I mean, they tell us we have 10 values. We can just count them if they didn't. So when you add all these numbers up, they come out to 51. Divide that by 10. And you should get 5.1. So that's it. You just grid in 5.1. Notice 51 divided by 10 will not fit in the answer space because it's too many, basically too many digits. So you can only enter 5.1. Next, 32, we have a dot plot, and they want to know what is the median. So remember, the median is the middle value. If you have an odd number of items like we do here, you divide it by 2. So 19 divided by 2 is technically 9.5, and then you round up. So the 10th value is what is going to equal the median. So you can just count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Here we have 10. You could also have counted from the higher values, starting on the right to the left, and you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and we end up at 10. So correct answer is just going to be 42, and that's what we grid in, nothing more to do. For 33, you have a probability question here. So you've got red marbles, yellow marbles, and blue marbles. The easiest way that I found to do this was just to use picking numbers. So if you notice here, it tells us probability of a yellow marble is 2 times the probability of a blue, and probability of a yellow marble is 6 times the probability of a red. So I said, okay, let's say there is 1 red marble. There would have to be 6 yellow marbles in the bag, for the probability to be 6 times as much. All right. Now, for the blue, notice if there's 6 yellow and the probability is twice that of selecting a blue marble, that means there's 2 times as many yellow as blue. So for blue, there would have to be 3. And you could pick different numbers here, but basically you're going to have to like, the easiest way is to start with red, which is really the number of marbles that there's the fewest of. Then figure out the number of yellow, the fact that it's 6 times, and then figure out the number of blue, which technically will be half the number of yellow, because it tells us here the probability of yellow is 2 times the number of blue, therefore the number of blue is half, the number of yellow. So once you have this, then we could just add all these up and say, okay, there's 10 total marbles. What's the probability of selecting a blue? Well, how many favorable outcomes do we have? So we have 3 of them. So you could grid this in as 3 divided by 10, or you could also grid it in as a decimal, which is just 0.3. So either answer would be acceptable, but it's 3 over 10 or 0.3. Moving back to the top of the page, number 34. This is a topic that has actually started appearing a lot recently on SAT exams. So we have a circle, we have a line which is tangent to the circle, and they wanted the slope of this tangent line. And what you have to use are 2 basic pieces of information here. First, if you draw a line from a center of a circle to a basically what's called a point of tangency, i.e. the single point where the tangent line intersects the circle, which is in this case is P, that line you draw, which is a radius, will be perpendicular to the tangent line. Okay, so that's the first thing we know. And the second thing is then going to be how the slopes of perpendicular lines are related. So the reason we want to know that is because the first thing I'm going to find out is the slope of point O to point P. So the slope of OP, you could count it out. You could also use the formula. So I'm just going to do, let's see here, -4 minus 0, subtracting the y's, and then 3 minus 0, subtracting the x's. So it's -4 over 3. And that matches, it's going downhill, has a negative slope. Again, you could also count it out. You could also say, okay, I go down 4, and I go to the right 3, which would be -4 over 3. Okay. Now, the slope of K, which is perpendicular to OP, will be the opposite reciprocal of that value. So again, the second thing you have to know is when 2 lines have perpendicular to each other, their slopes are opposite reciprocals. So the opposite reciprocal of -4/3 is going to be +3/4. We flip the fraction and we change its sign, in this case from negative to positive. So correct answer, you could either grid it in as 3 /4, or you could also put it in its decimal form of 0.75. Either one would be acceptable. Now below that we have number 35. So here, notice that what they're asking for is f of x times g of x. This is not a composition of functions. This is just a straight product, basically a function, just multiplying the 2 functions together. Okay? And so they have f of x, you have g of x, which has an r in it. That's a number. Constant just means it's a number. And they say, okay, if you multiply these 2 together, you get 4x cubed plus 108. What does r have to be for that to happen? So basically, what we're saying is we have x plus 3, and it's being multiplied by 4x squared minus rx plus 36. So you just go ahead and essentially do the distributive property twice. So here, here, here. So x times 4x squared is 4x cubed. X times -rx is -rx squared. And then x times 36 is just positive 36x. All right, so far, simple enough. Now I'm going to do the other 3 kind of distributions here. So the way that I like to do these polynomial multiplication problems, by the way, is write them on separate rows rather than just all one row, so I can line up by column the different powers, different degree terms. So 3 times 4x squared is going to be positive 12x squared. 3 times -rx is going to be negative 3rx, and then 3 times 36 is just plus 108. So a couple things. Notice here we have the 4x cubed, which matches. We have the plus 108 that matches. But we need these multiple terms in the middle here to all cancel out. So Like negative r x squared plus 12x squared has to equal 0 or no x squared. So hopefully you notice here, basically like negative r plus 12 has to equal 0. So what number does r have to equal? Well, r just has to equal 12, for this to cancel out. Negative 12 plus positive 12. Or if you looked at the x of the first terms, basically 36 minus 3r has to equal 0, or 36 has to equal 3r. Again, r has to equal 12. So correct answer for r is just 12, and that's going to be it. Nothing further to do with this problem. Okay, now moving to the top of the next page, we have problem number 36. Here you have a line which is graphed out, and they give you some random point which is on it, which is 0.25 comma r. So it's like whatever, kind of somewhere like right around here approximately. And they want to know what the value of r is. So the way I did this is just first found the slope of this line. Notice that you go down 2, starting here. So my slope's going to be negative 2 on top, and then you go to the right 1.5. So if you do this on the calculator and just divide it out and then turn it back into a fraction, it's going to come out to be negative 4/3. And also notice that the y-intercept value here is positive 2. So therefore, b is just going to equal 2. So equation of this line, y equals negative 4/3 x plus 2. And now you just plug in 0.25. And again, all this stuff with fractions and decimals, you can just do this all on the calculator, to work it all out and see what you get. And so it's going to be basically negative 1.25 is just 1/4. So if you multiply this through, it's like negative 4/3 times 1/4. Like the fours cancel. It's negative 1/3 plus 2, which is really 1 and 2/3. And then at that point, you could basically enter it for your answer as either its improper fraction, which is 5/3, or you could also put 1.66 where you truncate the decimal, or you could put 1.67 where you round it, round the decimal, to the, in this case, we'd have to round it to the hundredths place. So 5/3, 1.66, 1.67, all would be acceptable. And by the way, just a reminder, to find the slope and the y-intercept of the line, you could also go to the calculator, use the Lin-Reg function, and just plug in 2 points. Plug in the point 0, comma 2 up here, and then plug in the point 1.5, comma 0. And that would give you, the negative 4/3, although it would probably list it as a decimal. It'd be negative 1.333333 repeating, and the b value as well, and then go from there. Okay, now for 37, here we have one of the most difficult problems on the entire test. So basically what's happening here is we have the garden, and we know the garden is essentially like 50 feet wide and 45 feet long. But then there's a border around it of some unknown number of feet, and so then when you add the border in along with the garden, the total area is going to be 2,646 square feet. Okay, and they want to know what's the total distance, basically what's the width of this border. Okay, so if you notice, basically you take 50 and 45 and then you extend them x feet in both directions. So technically you add 1x on top and 1x on bottom, so that's 2x. And then you do the same thing to the 50. X feet to the right, x feet to the left, so that's 50 plus 2x. So that's the total, distance for the whole thing, including garden and border path. So you multiply these together because, one of these is the length, one of these is the width, and area is length times width. And so then we set that equal to the 2646 that were given in the problem. So on the left side, you go ahead, you FOIL this out. You're going to get 4x squared. Now for the inner and outer terms, you're going to get plus 100x and plus 90x. So you get plus 190x. and I'm actually doing it kind of reverse. The 4x squared comes from this 2x and 2x, the last two terms, but I'm putting it first because we're used to writing it in descending order. And then the 45 times 50 is 2250. Okay, we'll put that at the end, and that's equal to 2646. Now, this is just a quadratic equation. We can solve it on the graphing calculator. First thing, though, I would do is I would get it equal to 0. So you subtract 2646 on both sides, and you end up with 4x squared plus 190x minus 396. Now, technically, at this point, you could divide it by 2 just to make the numbers a little smaller and easier to work with. Okay, so we get 2x squared plus 95x minus 198 equals 0. If you don't recognize that or don't see that, you can just factor out a 2. I mean, basically what would happen is, like I said, you'd factor a 2 out front of everything, and then you would divide by 2, and then it just drops out. Okay, so because you have a 1 in front, and on the right side it stays 0. So I'm just going to erase that for now. Okay, so now it's time to solve this. So here you could turn to the calculator, or you could actually try to factor it. I mean, I'll just tell you the factorization is going to be, I mean, we know it's going to be 2x and x. We know it's going to be plus and minus. It's going to be plus 99 and minus 2, because your two factors of 198 are just going to be 99 and 2. And you could double check if you multiply this out. It's plus 99x for your inner term, minus 4x for your outer term. 99 minus 4 is 95. Okay, so that equals 0. So we get two answers. We get x equals 2, or we get x equals negative 99 over 2. Obviously, the negative value we disregard. So the correct answer for this one is just going to be positive 2. Now, if you were, so 2 is just what you would grid in. Just wanted to show you real quick. If you're having trouble with this, like getting the factoring to work, you could just go to the graphing calculator, and you could go ahead and graph out the function. So I'll just start with the original. Just let's say that you did not recognize that you could factor a 2 out. So we get 4x squared plus 190x minus 396, where it's equal to 0. Okay. So we go ahead, you would graph this, and now basically we're looking for the roots, the solutions, or the x-intercepts. All right. So notice here we only see one of them, but it does appear to be a positive value, so that would tell us. I mean, you could zoom out, see like the other one, it's like negative 49.5, so you'd have to zoom out a long way to get a full picture of this. But the fact that we have one here, an x-intercept, a root, a solution, now we could just go to the calculate menu. We could go to 0 because that's what we're concerned with. So for the left bound, notice it's way off the screen here, but I can see the x, and eventually the cursor will show up. Okay, so there's the cursor. I set my left bound right here. It's still to the left of where it crosses. Hit enter. And then I'll move it to the right of it so it's above it. Now it's off the screen, but that's fine. Hit enter, and now for a guess, I'll go back to like whatever, as close as possible. Again, it's still off the screen, but that's fine. So I hit enter, and right there it tells me x equals 2, y equals 0. So that would tell you that when you go to factor, 4x squared plus 190x minus 396, one of the factors is going to end up giving you the answer of x equals 2, which is going to be the answer to the problem. All right. So now let's just look at the last problem on this test, problem number 38. This one deals with percentages. This one can also be done using picking numbers, which is actually the main strategy that I employed. So I started off and said, okay, 1999, let's say the population in this city was 100. So in 2000, it was 2.6 times its population 99. So 2.6 times the 100 would equal 260. So the population increased by p% from 1999 to 2000. What's the value of p? So this is just really what's the percentage increase of if you start at 100 and you end at 260. So that's just going to be new minus old divided by old, and then basically be times 100 to put it in a percentage, but Yeah, we do want it to be in a percentage, so we would technically multiply our answer by 100. So all we're going to do is just 260 minus 100 divided by 100. So we get 160 divided by 100, which is 1.6, and now times the 100%. So the correct answer to this is 160%. Therefore, what you would grid in is 160, because again, they're saying that it increased by p%. So once we transform the number to a percentage, just that number with no percent sign is what we want for our answer. So that is, I believe, the easiest way to solve this problem. Um, Again, by using picking numbers, where you pick a starting value for the population in 1999, find out what it would be in 2000 based on the information I give you the problem, and then just do basically a percentage increase calculation. So those were all the answers to the calculator section from the April 2023 school day QAS. Again, section 4, a calculator section. If you have questions or comments or anything about any of these problems, please do leave a comment below. Of course, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and sign up for notifications as well. And be on the lookout again for more SAT and ACT related math content also.